we're going to take a look at and discuss, demonstrate various ways that Dynamo can be used to automate a number of tasks, ranging from standards adherence to data management and manipulation. If that doesn't get you excited, I don't know what will. My goal out of this course is to give you guys enough information to be able to construct functional Dynamo scripts, construct custom nodes, package those scripts and nodes for deployment to other users, and then identify help resources. Now, I'll tell you right now, when I did this the first time, it was an hour and a half long, so I obviously have to cut a lot of that out. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, I'm going to rely heavily on the belief that you guys are going to look at the handout. I put a lot of work in the handout, so anything like very, very specific, go ahead and take a look at that handout. Don't get too bogged down by trying to memorize the node structures that you're going to see, because I took screenshots of everything and I threw it in the handout. So you'll be able to go back and use that as a reference and see exactly how I laid everything out. What I want to do today is show you examples of the different things that we're going to take a look at with Dynamo, but really to show you what the possibilities are, and get you thinking, and hopefully get you some ideas of ways that you can start to leverage Dynamo. A little bit about myself. My name is Garrett Meyerbachtel. I am the MEP BIM specialist at Shive-Hattery. I've been working in the MEP field since 2000, primarily mechanical and plumbing. I can model electrical stuff. That's about it. I also am very heavily involved with scanning, point clouds, everything point clouds, that kind of thing. So it keeps things interesting and fun. Some corporate context. So Shive-Hattery, we have 8 offices, roughly 405 employees, a third of which use Revit. And I would say out of those, probably, I don't know, my boss is here now, so what, like 45 of those are MEP users, something like that? Okay. We serve a range of market sectors, everything from education to healthcare, commercial government, industry, and so on and so forth. And we have a very decentralized leadership model, which is a strength and a weakness. All right, so the agenda. We're going to go through the Dynamo selection methods, and that'll make sense to you in a second when we actually start to take a look at how we pick things in the Revit model via Dynamo. We'll go through constructing custom nodes, packaging nodes and scripts, and then we're going to take a look at those scripts in action. When I say model management, I'm thinking of 4 kind of key things. Doing material takeoff, a data mine. All right, we're going to do some data mining. We're going to take a look at the standards adherence. We're going to do that with the worksite example. We're going to take a look at project health. We have a project health kind of report that we run for our projects. And one of the specific things that we do with that is reference planes test. Basically, it just goes in and asks, hey, what are these reference planes doing? And then finally, we're going to take a look at the air terminal sizer. And that's really something more along the lines of the computational design kind of thing, where you do things by a set of rules, and it affects change in your model. And then if we have time, I'll take some questions and hopefully have answers. All right, so Dynamo selection methods. Again, I want to reiterate, all of this stuff is in the handout. I go into it in specificity, so if you don't have to memorize the locations of these things. It's all in the handout. All right, so first things first, categories and element types selection. All right, what you see here, you have the categories and the element types. This is where you specify what you want Dynamo to go get, okay? The next step in actually selecting something is to tell Dynamo to actually go get those elements. So that's where that all elements of category comes into play. You tell it what to get, and then you tell it to go get it. Pretty straightforward, right? Now there's a difference between categories and element types. You can think of categories as the things that you assign to families when you're setting them up. Plumbing fixture, mechanical equipment, so on and so forth. For element types, those are more things like system families, ducts, pipes, walls, things like that. Things that we can't actually change within the Revit model. When I say that, I mean, you know how when you pick a family, you have the option to edit family. Well, with the system or the element types, we don't usually have that option. Now, you will find that the API is a muddy place. And things that you think should be in categories actually end up in types. It's just the way it is. If you can't find it in one, just go look at the other. All right, family type selection. This is another one that I use frequently. You can actually pick a family type, and you know, this looks very, very specific. I'm hoping that you can see, really read that. But you can pick a specific family type, and then from that, glean several other things, like other information. So it's just another selection method. And then other selection methods that you'll see, select model elements, select model element, and one of my favorites, all elements in active view. The scripts that we go through today will have at least one of these selection methods, so you'll get to see that in action. All right, constructing custom nodes. I'm a big fan of the custom node, not when you're first learning Dynamo per se, but as you go along and get more comfortable with different node structures and node layouts, eventually you're going to get sick of doing the same thing over and over again. That's where the custom node comes into play. So in my example here, you know, I have, instead of having to do this every time, I just want to do this. So basically, I have this all things electrical node, and I've grouped all of this stuff into one place. So instead of laying this out every time, I can just drop this one node in. So how do you do that? There's a couple different methods, just like there's a million ways to do things in Revit. Same holds true for Dynamo. More than one way to get to the same place. So from the Dynamo start screen, which you're seeing here, you have the option to do custom node. Okay. Conversely, the way I typically do it is in the actual scripting environment itself. As you do a node, a node layout and right click, you have this option to create a custom node from there. I like to do it that way because it's more of an interactive environment. I can see the effects that my node layout is going to have if it's doing what I want it to do, and then I can just go ahead and make that custom node. And again, I can't say this enough. This is all in the handout, so don't feel like you have to grasp it all right this second. All right, so how do we package those nodes and scripts? Pretty straightforward. Creating your own, your own node package. From the start menu, you go up to packages, publish new package, which is what you're seeing right here. It takes you to a dialog box that looks like this. Pretty straightforward. You add file, and you just go and add all those nodes in. You publish. You can either publish it locally or publish it out to the masses. Typically, for what I'm doing, I'm making things for Shive specifically, so I publish all that stuff locally, and then I place it out on the network for everybody to use. And actually, we'll talk about that a little bit as well. Right here. So then to the network for all. And this raises an interesting question. You know, there was a time where it was difficult to kind of share your node libraries and your scripts with your users. Now, Dynamo has given us the option to actually tell it where to go to find the libraries, which makes this a lot easier. So as the admin, per se, of the Dynamo libraries, I can go through and get the updates locally on my machine, test to make sure everything still works, and then push it out to everybody. And they never know the difference. And I actually, I'll show you this forward that. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Dynamo. And under packages, actually settings, I'm sorry. Under the settings, this manage node and package paths, this is where you change that option. For my computer, you know, since I am the admin per se, I don't have that network path here. But this is where you would add it. You just go to the plus. It's going to come up with a dialog box eventually. And you would just path out to where you say your node library select folder. It'll add that location to here, and you're good to go.
And you can have multiple locations?
You can have multiple locations, and it'll just kind of go through the list and load everything that it finds in those locations. Yes, James?
What happens if you have more packages of different releases in multiple folders in that path?
Packages of multiple releases within that path, I wouldn't do that. I just wouldn't do that, because it's going to mess with your scripts. Things are going to become deprecated, and they're not going to work.
You'll break it.
Yeah, you'll break it. So again, that's why when there's updates, I get those updates, I test them, and then I push them out. One network location, everything's in the same spot, everybody goes to the same place, and you don't have to worry about that kind of thing.
Now, how do you deploy these paths to all the users? How do you roll it up and set this path, or do you have them do it manually
Right now, manually, which
on every user's machine?
for me, it's not that big of a deal because right now my pool of users is like 10. But it will become an issue as this becomes more prevalent. That is going to be something that they have to fix. We need to be able to deploy that in a similar way that we would deploy locations in Revit or files, things like that. So right now, I kind of luck out because, like I said, I have just a small pool of users. Mostly our BIM coordinators. But going into the future, as we make more mainstream tools, like what we're going to look at, it's going to present an issue.
Have you tried rolling it up into that user profile roaming location and then actually push that into whatever logon script or whatever that they pull those folders into that roaming location on everyone's machine? Have you tried that?
I have not, but that's not typically in my jurisdiction of the company. That's
Okay.
more that man in the corner.
Okay. No, I'm just saying that could be an alternate because you don't have
One of
to,
those things that could work. We could push
because it's always pointing to that roaming folder. Sorry,
Yes, we cheat.
don't want to interrupt you.
Oh, you're fine. That's great. Okay. So, that's how you do that. Don't be afraid to share those node libraries so everybody's working from the same place. It is possible. So, and we actively do that, and it does work. Okay. I know we kind of breezed through that stuff real quick, but I really want to get to the heart of the matter here. So, which one of these? We're going to go back to the slide. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do, as soon as my computer gets up, okay, we're going to do data model. Okay, we're going to go into our Revit model, we're going to pull some stuff out, some parameter values, we're going to throw it into Excel, and we're going to present it in a way that makes sense. Okay? So, go ahead and hop over to Dynamo. And it's going to take a little bit of time to open here, not a whole lot, but this one does have a lot of stuff going on. Again, don't get caught up in looking at all that and trying to memorize what it is. These screenshots of all this stuff is in the handout, and it's thoroughly explained as well as I can. So, what this is going to do, before we even get started, it's going to go into my project. I have it pulling information on duct work and all things duct work related, and pipe and all things pipe related. I'm a DP person, but this approach can work with whatever, any kind of data that you want to mine out. You can use this same setup, just change a couple values and so on and so forth. So I'm going to click run, and once I click run, it'll be a couple seconds, but then you'll see Excel open and it'll start to populate with data. Assuming it will populate with data. All right. So to me, that in and of itself is pretty slick. If you just think about how cumbersome it can be to actually pull stuff out of Revit and get it to Excel, it's not a one-way thing. You gotta take it out to the CSV and all that kind of stuff. So right there, look how quick that was. Okay, so what's going on here? First things first, this is not the final product of the material takeoff, okay? Think of these tabs as a database, right? So what did we pull? We pulled system type. We're gonna just work with the piping in here. We pull the family name and type that is associated with that system type. And please don't expect these to be the specification. I don't design anymore, so I don't really care about the specs per se. So if you see a pipe type that's not ready for the system, sorry. And then we put all the pipe diameter data, all the pipe length data, and you'll see here that there's some information for design option and element ID. Some of you may be wondering, why does it say -1 for design option? I learned this through trial and error when working with the API. Revit treats main model as -1. So, hey, okay. So when you see a -1, that's the main model design option. And then all the element IDs. Okay, that's great. We have all of our database stuff here. This is not very meaningful, it's not very helpful, but that's where Excel comes in. Are any of you familiar with pivot tables? Okay, we're going to use a pivot table here. So I'm going to click that option. It's asking me for a range. It automatically just selects the range of data that I have. I can go ahead and click OK, and it takes me to this. Now, there's a little bit of setup here, but as you start to go along and start playing with these different layouts, you can kind of start to see where we're going here. So I'm going to drag down system type. That's cool. It listed all my system types. I like that. Family name and type. So now it's grouping all the family name and types under my system types. Let's try pipe diameter. That's neat. So now it's listing all the different pipe diameters that are associated with my different systems and what pipe types that they belong to. And then I'm going to go ahead and calculate pipe length. All right, just like that. It's that quick. We just did a material takeoff. Okay, in a much more meaningful and interactive way than what you typically find in the workflow that you would do within Revit natively. And we did it in a couple minutes. Think of the time that's going to save you. And this works really great on large projects. I know that this example project doesn't have a lot of stuff going on in it, but it works just as quickly in larger projects as it does in smaller projects. And so then from here, this is an Excel sheet. You can go ahead and reference these cells just like you normally would. You can filter if you want to specific system types, so on and so forth. So this is just a really nice way to do a quick data mine to get some stuff out of the Revit model and be able to present it to a client or whoever in a meaningful and interactive way that's not so daunting maybe to look at, in my opinion. All right. So let's close that down and actually take a look at the script. So how's it doing what it's doing? First things first. You guys can see that. We're going through and we're telling it to get stuff. This all things duct collector, that is a custom node. Okay. If we go ahead and take a look at it, the makeup of it, there you go. It's those basic selection methods. Element types, categories. Go get them, right? They're all packaged together in one spot instead of having to do that. We just have that one node as soon as this catches up. Maybe we won't do that again. All right. So we're telling it to go get stuff, right? From there, we're putting it through a filtering process, which you got to tell Dynamo, you got to be a little bit discriminate. It'll just go get everything if you tell it not to. So this first little filter area, it's just grabbing all the things that are on the construction phase. Okay. And one thing I want to point out right now, you see how these all look the same? This is the beautiful thing about programming. Once you figure out one structure, it's the same each time to do the same operation. It doesn't matter what the element is. You just put it, you want to filter something, you can filter it this way each and every time for whatever element. So when I was laying this out, I didn't do all this, I copied and then connected the dots. I can't stress that enough. It follows rules, it gives you predictable results. It's wonderful. I love it. I wish everything was like that. All right. So from there, we come up here. And this is where you saw that main model, the design option come into play. In our files, we have some design options that house elements that we use for dynamic legends and things like that. Obviously, I don't want to keep those in material takeoff. So this is where I'm putting in all those elements through a filtering process where I ask, hey, what design option are you on? Are you on main model? Because if you are, that's what I want to keep. So that's what this top part is doing. Now, for all the elements that are left over, it comes down here and goes through another filtering process. It more or less dead ends though, because this is where we would go if we wanted to go ahead and grab the other elements that are on other design options, okay? And then from there, once all that stuff passes the test, this is the node layout. I wish that I could fix that so you can actually read it. Where I take those elements and I grab specific values of different parameters. So system type, size, length, design option, all the things that we were listing in this spreadsheet. I put it through the rigmarole, and then I kick it out to Excel, okay? As you go along in Dynamo, this kind of structure here will become very familiar for you. This is kind of the standard way that you take a bunch of stuff, put it all together, and push it out to Excel, okay? And again, you don't have to remember all this. This is all in a handout, and I explain it in detail. So you don't have to try to remember all this. I realize this is a ton of information, so. Okay, so that's a basic data mine. And again, like I was saying, if you take a look at all these structures, this group is all identical. This group is all identical. It looks overwhelming, but when you're laying it out, just take it a chunk at a time, okay? And once you figure out one way or one method, it's gonna be that same method for that operation. All right, so moving on. I'm not gonna start this up. Okay, so the work set changer. This one was the very first script I ever wrote, and it didn't always look like this. And actually, I want to show you guys what it looks like starting off here. It's gone through several different rewrites. But it's a good example. This is what it used to look like. It was pretty ridiculous. This was, I always joked that this was kind of like the Hulk smash way of going about this operation. But I want to show you guys this because it really illustrates that as you go along and as you learn, you'll find new ways of doing the same exact thing that absolutely streamline your operation. So don't be discouraged if you write something that looks like this. I mean, it's gonna happen, but like I said, as you go along, you're gonna learn new methods and everything else, and you'll have this for posterity. All right. So the material or the work set changer. The intent behind the work set changer was, we have standards. We take a lot of time to develop those standards, and we have users that don't always follow those standards, and that's fine. Okay. But when we get to the end of the project and we're ready to archive, wouldn't it be nice if we had a way to go ahead and push our standards back into a project, put it on the shelf, and then we would know what to expect when we go and get that project back off the shelf. Now, I do know that the scenario that I'm going to lay out for you won't work in every case. There's projects that require special things. This is really for the out of the box. There was no reason that they didn't follow our standard kind of project, right? So the work set changer. First things first, I'm going to go ahead and go into my project here and screw up my work sets. Okay. Basically, I'm just going to window around everything and move it all to the same work set. All right. And it's also all going to disappear because we have scope access turned on. Uh-oh. Okay. Now this is the cool thing about this one. I'm gonna run it, and you will actually see all that stuff reappear, assuming that it actually runs correctly. Okay? And I know it's kind of boring to sit here and wait for it to finish running, but I also kind of wanted you guys to get a feel for run times on these. So ta-da, all those elements reappeared. You can remember that we put it all in the scope boxes one, so let's go ahead and check a couple of these. So if we look at the air terminal, it's been moved back to our M ductwork work set. We have some generic equipment here. That has been moved back to the M equipment work set. We come over here, take a look at this ductwork. We got that moved back to the M ductwork work set. You get the idea, right? So how's it doing this? Same kind of idea. We're going through, we're getting elements, and we're changing a parameter value. It's really very, very straightforward. The one thing that I will point out about how work sets behave in Revit, you know, we give them a name, right? And you would think that that name would be the actual parameter value, but it's not. Revit uses the element ID of those work sets as its parameter value. It doesn't show you that ID because it wouldn't make sense to us. You know, what makes sense to us is an actual written word. But for Revit, that written word is maybe 279, 281, or so on and so forth. So what I mean by that, let's take a look at the work sets node here. See all these numbers? Those are the actual work set element IDs, right? That doesn't make a lot of sense to us. But they do correspond to those names. So to make this dynamic, you know, because I don't want to have to try to remember a name or a number that is associated with a work set name. You have to remember that Revit's a database, right? And that database changes from project to project. So that's, unless you're using a static startup file, those numbers are always going to be changing, right? So you have to come up with a way that is adaptable. And the way we do that is go through a filtering process for the work sets. And it just looks something like this. It's looking for, you know, you pass in the name of the work set, you put it through a filtering process. Hey, I'm looking for M underscore ductwork, and it goes through and it grabs that for you. So if we show what's going on here, this in, that's where that element ID goes, and that becomes the parameter value that you push into that. Now, I went through a lot of trial and error learning that, so don't think that I just knew that. I did not just know that. It was a very long and frustrating process because I didn't understand why it wouldn't just take the name of the parameter for the value. All right. So that's basically what's going on. We're going through, we're grabbing a bunch of elements, and we're assigning the parameter value to the work set parameter. Okay. And we just do that for all those elements in the project. Again, I know it's a lot to try to take in, it's a lot to try to look at. Please reference the handout, and all my contact information is in there too. So if you have any questions when you come across this stuff, please, you know, don't struggle alone. There's no reason for that. Let me know. I will say that the piping presents an interesting problem, you know, because there's no differentiation between pipe to pipe, right? Whether it be mechanical piping or plumbing piping in the Revit world, except by system classification, right? Well, I made myself my life a little bit easier, and you guys can think about this too. And this applies to any kind of element that you want to be able to filter easily. But I went into project parameters, and for pipe systems, I added project parameters. Mechanical piping system and plumbing piping system. That's how I'm filtering, okay? Chilled water return, mechanical piping system. That's how I'm going through, grabbing all those pipes, and putting it through a filter process. Hey, are you mechanical piping or plumbing piping? And then I apply the work sets that way. Okay. Just something to think about. Makes your lives a little bit easier. Okay. So that's the work set changer script. Moving right along. Let's go ahead and take a look at the reference planes. Now, this is one of my favorite ones, and it's really simple. It performs a very specific operation. For whatever reason, in our company, reference planes appear to be somewhat of an issue. You know, they get created, just hundreds of reference planes, and nobody really knows what they're doing. And so I always got the question, is there an easy way to see if this reference plane is actually hosting anything? Like, well, unless you actually go through and get all the elements and take a look at what the parameter value for host is, not really. Well, along comes Dynamo. And the nice thing about this is that it just goes through, gets all the reference planes in the project, grabs all the elements, checks what reference plane they're on, and just asks the question, hey, are you being used by anything? Yes or no, right? So this is one of the ones where, you know, on the model management side, it's a really quick way to do a comparative analysis. You have all this stuff, what is all this stuff doing? And the key thing about this, I'm employing that all elements in active view, so I need to make sure that I have a 3D view active and that everything is turned on, which here it is. All right, and right now I just have it kicking out the result to an Excel sheet. You don't have to do that. You can look at the results here, but I'm an Excel nerd. So I'm going to go ahead and run it, and what you're going to see is it's going to go through, it's going to query my Revit file, and it should come back with some data here. All right. So it's gone through, it's grabbed all those reference planes, it's grabbed all those elements in the project and done that check. Are you being used or are you not being used for hosting purposes? This is just checking if it's actually hosting anything. So what this little report does for me, it actually lists what reference planes are hosting, which I have 2 level 1 ceiling. I have non-reference plane or non-hosting reference planes, and I have this test example. And then it gives me a % of non-hosting reference planes. You know, you can have it report back to whatever you want, but 33% of my reference planes aren't hosting. But I like this example because it's simple, it's easy to grasp, and you can start to see how you can do those relationship checks, you know, and project checks. And this is, like I said, this is one of those